Well, as news goes, it was about as welcome as the dentist telling you he's going to have to redo some root canal work. The International Monetary Fund has looked at the evidence and decided that the longed-for recovery in the world economy is at stalling point. It predicts the British economy will grow at a much slower rate than expected, and official figures here show the national debt has risen to over £1 trillion. There are confident predictions it will stay there. And tomorrow may be a day for staying in bed too. George Osborne's going to tell us what the British economy did in the last 3 months of 2011. JBLYNAM is the man with the syringe.
The world faces a 1930s moment unless it acts now to prevent a downward spiral into economic catastrophe. They're the words of the IMF boss Christine Lagarde. As a former French minister, she knows more than most how European politicians have been dragging their feet in this crisis. On top of that bleak warning, the IMF revised Britain's forecasted growth from 1.6 to a very modest 0.6% this year. And it's also revised growth expectations from 2.4 down to 2% next year. That's rampant growth compared to the Eurozone, which the IMF now thinks will shrink by 0.5% this year. Globally, the fund has revised downwards its prediction for worldwide growth from 4 to 3.3%.
The world recovery, which was weak in the first place, is in danger of stalling. The epicenter of the danger is Europe, but the rest of the world is increasingly affected.
Things were more black and white back in the 1920s and 30s. In Weimar, Germany, inflation was so rampant that it printed a 1 trillion mark note. No such fear in Britain, though the national debt has now reached £1 trillion. That served as an aperitif ahead of tomorrow's official growth figures, which may not show growth at all.
The reality is the Office for Budget Responsibility revised up its forecast for growth in the Eurozone in 2011 and revised down its forecast for growth for the United Kingdom in 2011. The government likes to blame everybody else for the economic troubles, except for itself. First they blamed the snow, then they blamed the royal wedding, now they're blaming the Eurozone. When is this government going to take responsibility for its own actions?
If she wants to know who's responsible, at least partly, for the mess this country's in, she should just look immediately to her left. I have to say, it's come to something when Katie Price's tweets make more sense on the economy than the Labour front bench.
But even some of those in the city who doubted are believers again in the UK economy.
Last year I was the angel of doom. I was one of the most pessimistic in the market. This year, if anything, I think growth could be better than most people assume. But to keep it in context, I'm looking for growth just below 1%. That's not really anything to show off about.
Of course, that's scant consolation for the thousands of people, especially in the retail sector, who are looking for new jobs in this rebalancing economy. Or even for those refining oil in Corriton, whose parent company went bust today, jeopardising 850 jobs in Essex. And the man who controls the cost of borrowing wasn't sugarcoating the pill which many are already facing in the economy.
After the steepest downturn in output since the 1930s, the UK economy is in the process of rebalancing. Starting from a position of excessively leveraged balance sheets, the path of recovery is likely to be arduous, long and uneven. The position of the world economy, especially in the euro area, is serious. But there is no reason to despair. All crises come to an end.
Of course, the health or otherwise of the UK economy depends crucially on whether the train wreck that is the Eurozone crisis can be averted. Greece is in talks with its bankers over a €100 billion write-down. If they can't come to a deal and there's a sudden and unplanned default, then Greece, the Eurozone and all of Europe will be plunged into an instant recession.
With the exception of a few hedge funds who took out insurance against a Greek default, nearly everyone wants a deal because they know the consequences are too unpalatable if they don't.
The immediate and most significant consequences of an uncontrolled default would be that there would be significant pressure on other countries like Portugal, Ireland, Spain and Italy that in that financial markets would fear or maybe expect that similar defaults might happen there too. So that would really, the crisis will very quickly transmit from Greece to these other countries, really multiplying the effects and leading to a much greater recession in the Eurozone.
But you don't think that's going to happen?
We do not think that is the most likely scenario, really for that reason, that the economic consequences are very significant indeed.
But things aren't all that bad. The European Central Bank has made billions of euros available to Europe's banks at cheap rates. And it's starting to work. The cost of borrowing for Spain and Italy has gone down and makes those two countries less likely to join Portugal, Ireland and Greece in the bailout club. And across the Atlantic, whisper it, there are tentative signs of US recovery.
So as President Obama prepares for his last State of the Union address before the election in November, he can also silently hope that unemployment will continue to inch downwards. For those yet to see the much-lauded silent film The Artist, here's a spoiler alert. The central character finds redemption in the end, having previously looked in all the wrong places. Perhaps governments and policymakers around the world need to be a bit quieter in future and start looking in the right places for economic redemption.
Well,